This week we listened to Peace of Mind by Iron Maiden, their 1983 album. It was selected by me.
Ethan, I'd like to take a moment, if
mm,
you don't mind,
mm.
to reflect on the fact that you have you have made a selection, and all three of us are here.
Yeah, for once. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Anyways, carry on, sir.
As soon as this is over.
yeah. Um,
Seventh seal is broken.
Yep, the
um,
apocalypse is nigh.
my process for selecting this album was um Sam and Brian both chose albums that were from their youth, right? And so I
Yeah.
was like, okay, let me pick something that I listened to a lot when I was a teenager. Um, and so this is one of the three Iron Maiden albums that I put on just repeat constantly. Not that I didn't have other Iron Maiden stuff, music in my iPod or whatever, but that specifically the three in a row: Number of the Beast, Peace of Mind, Power Slave, sort of the golden era of Iron Maiden, were
Mhm.
the three that I just listened to so much. So it was kind of a choice between those three albums. Um, and yeah, I landed on this one because I think this one, everyone's heard Number of the Beast, at least the song Number of the Beast. And I think this album's a little bit more interesting than Power Slave,
Mhm.
especially on a discussion level. Um, so that's why I chose this one.
And as I was listening to the album, I think the only song on the album that continues to see regular radio play is "The Trooper."
Yes, which is probably one of their most popular songs, period. I would
Yeah,
say maybe number two.
yeah, I would agree.
Um, which that song is really tight. It's really, um, it's very like metal, and it has it's upbeat, and it has, it's not as, it doesn't have as weird themes as some of their other songs do. Um, it's just sort of more about war and whatever. So I think it's a little bit more relatable and classic for a lot of people. Not everyone wants to listen to a 7.5 minute song about Dune, um, which is a tragedy because that song is amazing. Um,
It is.
but yeah, I mean, I like The Trooper. I think that's one of those like classic heavy metal songs that's gonna be in like any like classic heavy metal playlist, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, no question.
All right. So that was my sort of why I chose it. What are your guys' backgrounds with said music? Said specifically the album Iron Maiden in general.
So after the album, I think this is the first time I probably listened to the album in its entirety,
Mm-hmm.
which was good. But obviously familiarity with Iron Maiden and numerous songs from their library. I think the album does a very good job of capturing all elements of the band's music, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. Their range of music is well reflected throughout the album.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely have songs that reflect their, pure British metal,
Yeah.
and then and then you have things that have almost the ballad style sound that's common in thrash metal, especially out of the 80s.
Hmm.
So it really reflects all the different type of music in the album, which is actually very nice because it's still, it's a very tight album. It's very cohesive in parts. There are some songs, at least when I was listening to it through Apple Music, where you don't even notice right away that you've switched to another song because they're so tightly composed, even though it's not the type of music that's like some others that we've listened to where everything is so similar, but there's a very distinct Iron Maiden sound, and that's very well captured on a lot of the album.
Right. Sam?
I've never really gone and like listened to an Iron Maiden album back to back, and I imagine that's not true for Brian, but I know it wasn't true for me on this album, and it's not true for me with Iron Maiden in any capacity really. But I have heard a lot of their music just because they're sort of they're a pretty influential band, I think, a band that a lot of people heard. But yeah, for me, this is sort of the first sitting down with a full-length type experience. And yeah, I agree that it seems, at least based on everything else that I've heard from them, like a very quintessentially Iron Maiden album.
Yeah. And this is the first album that has the like Dream Team Iron Maiden lineup, because this is the first album that Nico was on. So they finally had fucking Steve Harris, Bruce Dickinson, Nico. Like they had, all the ingredients that I think people remember to be a very Iron Maiden, right, sound.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fun thing, I have to bring it up. I've mentioned it before when we've talked about Nico, is he can't play the double bass. He doesn't. He tried it.
Right.
He can't figure it out. But when you listen to some of their songs, you might think, that sounds like a double bass. No, the man just has the fastest right foot on the planet. and that contributes to some of their sound because he is using a very quick kick.
Yeah. I mean, he's just a very, very fast and precise drummer, I would say.
Oh, absolutely.
Like when you listen to some of the fills and like I was listening today, I think it's like the second song. No, it's not Revelations. It's probably Flight of Icarus. It might have been Where Eagles Dare, actually, which is the first song. You get these like fills where he plays two fills on the thing, and you can tell, especially at the time, that this isn't probably like copy pasted, but it sounds exactly the same. Like he's hitting the exact same part of the drum with the exact same intensity, right? And it's so like the precision is crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's probably one of the most underrated metal drummers by people who don't actually listen to music that realize just how good he actually is. But I mean, the band as a whole, everything is their instrumentation is very tight.
Yeah,
they do a very good job playing at very rapid speeds without sacrificing quality. Like it's not walls of sound.
Right.
It's distinct playing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Iron Maiden is one of the few bands that every single aspect of the band is good, like musically, like, and I don't necessarily mean like the writing. Like you can think that like maybe this line here isn't so good and this line here isn't so good, but like their rhythm guitar, both of their guitarists are good. The bassist is good. The drummer is good. The singer is good. Like everything is like every member is like good and can stand alone in some way, and they're not necessarily like prodigious, but they're all good.
Right. Yeah, it's one of those things where there's no one bringing the band down.
Yeah.
Yeah, and most importantly, they're really locked in with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, there's some tight playing.
Yeah, I think that is the sort of thing that typically in bands where everyone, it's not even it's frequently not even so much about gross ability as it is just like mutual respect, because you can even think of like a great example would be White Stripes. Meg White is by no means a virtuoso drum player, but
That's putting it gently, Sam.
But what she does works very well for the music being written. She and Jack play together quite well, and it lends itself to a very distinctive sound.
Yeah.
Here, though, you do have people with quite a bit more technical proficiency, and because of that degree of mutual respect, they actually are. The pieces do feel complementary and in conversation with one another, which I think is one of the things that serves as sort of a common thread between. It's one of the other pieces of commonalities. One of the other commonalities that metal can tend to have with classical music. I mean, it uses a lot of the vocabulary and adds distortion to begin with, but it also, that kind of top-down, keeping all of the parts in conversation approach is also something more endemic to either single composers or really, really cohesive groups.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And this is definitely a band that classical music, you can tell, is an influence. That these people they've actually listened to classical music and are, to some degree, using things that they've heard in the music. I mean, especially like Bruce, who is an opera singer, right? Or something like that. Like you can just hear it. And in line with what you said about them being tight together, Iron Maiden is one of the few bands that I've ever heard this happen, where there will be like a guitar solo, but both guitarists will be playing the solo at the same time, but like making chords with one another and like dueling and like going back and forth, and like this, they'll play a bar here, they'll play a bar here, they'll like do 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 do, and it really does have a neat effect. Yeah.
It's interesting you bring up the background as an opera singer, because you don't just pick that up in the vocals, because obviously when that high falsetto comes through, at times you can really hear it. But the nature of the storytelling of the songs, it's very, and that's true on many of their albums, that it's telling stories as you listen. It's told from a narration standpoint, which is true of operas.
And I think in general that's sort of the, like, not being incredibly well versed in it, but that seems to be the, like, sort of the, like, British rock metal thing, right? You have Metallica doing kind of, I mean, there's storytelling and some character-driven stuff, but I think in general, like, I hear a lot of commonality in terms of, like, at least what the self-concept as a band and as a project is with, like, Jethro Tull. And
absolutely.
There's very, like, we are minstrels conveying a story to you about somebody else, right? And again, that very, like, rooted in, the kind of acting styles at the Globe Theatre that had to be very blown up and very exaggerated to be perceptible to people who might be quite far back, right? There's this kind of, painting in very, very broad gestures emotionally that was endemic, I think, to a lot of human, at least performed storytelling for a long time before we had, cameras that could get close-ups. And
right, it's a theatrical stage play storytelling versus a movie. Yeah. Absolutely. And on the storytelling line, almost every song in this album is influenced by either a book or a movie. So there's To Tame a Land, which is Dune. Sun and Steel was based on Miyamoto Musashi's work. Let's see. Still Life was based on a short story called The Inhabitant of the Lake. The Trooper was based on The Charge of the Light Brigade. Where Eagles Dare was based on a film by the same name. Quest for Fire is based on a film by the same name. Uh, Revelations is based on the book of Revelations. And then Flight of Icarus is, obviously a well-known Greek tale. So, like pretty much the entire album is based on some form of literature or some form of like whatever that they were like, hey, I really like this. I'm gonna make a song about it. So in a way, the kids who make like Minecraft versions of songs, Iron Maiden was like the OG writing fan music.
I can definitely see some of that.
I mean, they had a whole album, The Wicker Man,
Yeah.
literally based on of the British horror story. So yeah, that's pretty consistent amongst just their music in general.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, they tend to, and I think this is one of the early establishing factors of metal for it being what it is today, is a lot of taking a lot of horror influence and then putting it into the writing of the music. And not all metal bands did that. Like, for instance, Sam brought up Metallica. Metallica doesn't do that at all. Metallica writes about, like, drugs and fucking, shit like that. Like, normal, everyday stuff, not, like, stories and whatever. But, like, Iron Maiden was one of the first bands. Or, like, Black Sabbath is another good example. Also British, right, yeah. Where they're taking actual, like, horror writing and tropes and ideas and stuff, and then incorporating it into the music. And I mean, that's definitely played a huge role in making metal what it is right now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, although, at this point, it really has split off into so many different kind of microcosmic subgenres on the basis of like what specific aspects of metal resonated with people, because there is like at least now there's plenty of like I know this is already a term, this term has already fallen out of circulation, but it's like sad boy metal. Like there's a lot of that now, which has kind of more metal constructed with sort of a grunge mentality. There's not a lot of that epic storytelling type stuff happening right now.
No,
At least
yeah.
not that I'm aware of.
I mean, it's more so aesthetic than it is, at least modernly, than it is actual storytelling being told through the music. I mean, it's definitely still happening. Like, there's definitely people who are directly telling stories with music. But yeah, it's definitely more of a, you even think of, super popular bands, Avenged Sevenfold, Slipknot, stuff like that, where it's like directly horror, right?
Yeah, and even with, the Avenged Sevenfold album we listened to, there was definite storytelling going on in that album.
That's true.
Yeah.
Though I wouldn't necessarily call Avenged Sevenfold
not the same
modern
way.
Anymore. Even though they're still releasing music, are they actually? I guess they were not, because...
Yeah, I think if we're looking more at like kind of the stuff that started, bands that started forming and releasing music primarily in the 2010s. The strain, it's definitely moved in kind of a different direction.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't sure if there was more going on, if Sam had completed the thought, or if there was more commentary.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I really can't think of a whole lot of bands that started their first release after 2010 that I even listened to, so I've got nothing to compare
that's
to
fair.
outside of what we've heard here. I think, as far as what I listened to, their first albums would have been released in the early 2000s for the most part, but most earlier than that.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And an unsurprising statement, I think.
Yeah, no, I would agree.
Um, let's see.
Ethan, favorite song on the album,
Oh
out of
God.
curiosity, if you have one, because it's hard. As I was trying to figure that out myself, I went back and forth amongst several of the songs.
Okay. So it's hard. I think when I was younger, Still Life used to be my favorite song on the album because it's the most creepy.
Mhm.
Um, and it's like insane. And when I was younger, I used to be like, "Oh, I'm insane," whatever. You know, the angst. Um, but now it's between Revelations and To Tame a Land. I think it's To Tame a Land. I really like that song. It has a really nice flow to it, and it's long, and it's like actually, I don't know, because the writing in Revelations, the way that they've taken like the lyrics and like they took them from the Book of Revelations, but also there's some like influence from like Crowley and stuff like that, and they've like chopped it up and like changed it
Mhm.
around, and it's like it's got a really nice, I don't know, lyrically it's really nice. It's kind of deep and whatever. So I might actually have to say that one, Revelations.
That was my number one as well, actually. It's
Mine's
just
mine's Still Life.
Nice.
Not for the lyrical content. I mean I do I kind of enjoy the lyrical content as well as sort of a change in a more like, but mostly I think it has a lot of there's a lot more nuance to it than meets the eye musically.
Hmm.
I think that they're painting in smaller gestures than in a lot of the rest of the album, and I tend to prefer that kind of greater restraint in a lot of cases. Um,
Absolutely. That
Also,
song has.
I forget. Yeah, it's just got a really interesting riff too.
Hmm.
Um,
absolutely.
And that song has a really nice build up too. It kind of starts low and quiet, and
Hmm.
it crescendos through the course of the song into the big bombastic fullness at the end of the song.
Hmm.
mhm.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, if only it were longer. Although it's 5 minutes long, I think that it probably does its service to. There's not a single song in this album that's long, that's shorter than 3 minutes, which is crazy.
And most are five or more, with a
Yeah,
couple even longer. But I think that goes to the storytelling nature of the songs, is you don't want it to wrap up quickly.
right.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not repeat verse, chorus, chorus. There's always some differences. There's and not just amongst the lyrics, also amongst the transitions, the interludes, the bridges, all kind of have that build up throughout.
Right. Right.
I do think one one thing that I did notice myself kind of picking up on throughout the course of the listen, and again, I think this is something that I am. This impression may change with repeat listen, but I did detect sort of a almost like a Marvel movieification of a lot of the source material,
Mm-hmm.
where they're conforming a lot of the source material to this kind of preset narrative arc that they know works for songs,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think when you're pulling from such a wide array of fiction, like it's cool. Like on the one hand, it's cool. It's cool that they found their voice and they consistently sound like Iron Maiden. But if you're going to be pulling from all of these disparate sources, you kind of I would expect a little more cross pollination, right?
Mm.
I would expect a little less like of the same satisfying metal arc, right? Like a little more engagement with the source material in a way that alters both, rather than kind of takes a lot of the set dressing, and not even set dressing, but takes a lot of the imagery from this source material and then conforms it to an Iron Maiden song. And that's not, again, that's not an invalid artistic choice. I just think, to me, it would have been interesting to see more cross-pollination. And in general, it's the one piece of classical music that I do feel is kind of absent. And again, this just fucking happens with metal bands, because, I mean, the reality is it's really fun to write cool riffs.
Mm-hmm.
It's really fun to play cool riffs, and they sound really good. And so I can't really object to the fact that this album is shot through with cool riffs, but, like, the guitar solos don't always feel like they're really telling, like, it feels like it's like this is a guitar solo and not this is the guitar solo conveying the story being told lyrically, right?
Yeah.
It's just a cool guitar solo. And that's, again, sometimes a cool guitar solo is just a cool guitar solo, and it doesn't need to be anything else. There's nothing wrong with that. But it is this kind of, again, wanting to me, I think in general, metal acts tend to be the kind of people who gravitate towards these really heady concepts, but are not, will frequently commit to kind of their own interpretation of them rather than being modified by them, right? Existing in like a serious communication with them. And that's hard and makes it difficult to focus on writing music, I understand. If you spend all of your time digesting disparate source material. But I would be interested in seeing, and on To Tame a Land, you know, you get a little bit in that they're like, okay, this is set on a desert planet with like a vaguely Arabian-coded culture, so we're going to use Phrygian
Yeah.
to write some of our riffs, right? And I'm like, okay, you know, it was the '80s. That was the sort of the memified version of that. That was how we knew. That was how a listener, particularly then, having presumably very little access to like scholars of Middle Eastern music, would be like, this is the closest sound we can approximate. So I can't fault them for using that, because like, unless you're going to go full fretless and start doing microtonal shit, which the internet didn't exist.
We had in 1983.
Our relationship with the Middle East was probably not worse than it is now, but bad in a way that ensured we knew even less about them.
Yeah.
So I get that, but again, to me, like when art reaches to other sources, I like to see a lot of cross-pollination rather than appropriation. Feels like too harsh of a word, but I'm kind of grasping for another one.
Yeah.
Which I think there was an intent to do here. It just wasn't. There wasn't quite as much digestion, so much as like, these are some cool ideas. Let's like put the imagery in our songs, get them into the narrative arc, and then like we'll go and fill it with cool riffs and a lot of awesome playing.
Right. I have two comments on what you said. One, you're right, but that's not the worst that they ever do that. If we listen to the next album, which is Power Slave, which is an album that's about ancient Egypt, it's way worse on that case. Yes. Second, I will say that yes, I agree with the sometimes it does kind of feel like they're forcing the story into their style as opposed to the other way around, because there are some songs on this album that I think don't hit, and I don't think any Iron Maiden album is ever 100% every song is good. I can't think of one that I've listened to where every single song is amazing. And I think songs like Flight of Icarus and Quest for Fire are the two that stand out for me, that just kind of, you're like, like it's not that it's bad, it's not a bad song, it just kind of feels like out of place.
I do also love
uninspired.
that Quest for Fire opens talking about humans coexisting with dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Which again, I get that that's probably more of a failings of the source material at the time, but it's a very quaint thing to hear somebody talk about, like deliver a story unironically about now. It's just funny.
Right. Yeah, I haven't seen the movie, but I'm almost positive that there are dinosaurs in the movie in some capacity.
I actually don't remember there being any.
Oh, okay.
But
I can't. It's been such a long time.
all I know is this image of Ron Perlman as a literal caveman is just seared into my brain.
Yeah.
And like very, very little aside from that. Like I remember various shots of marshes and mountains that look vaguely like Nepalese mountains.
Maybe they mention. Well, I guess they don't really mention anything in that movie, do they? But yeah, I don't know. I don't I don't know. Ron Perlman is also the perfect choice for a caveman, just the skull shape. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that's one of the reasons why I chose this album, is because this is a very quintessential Iron Maiden album in the fact that the songs that don't hit, you can really tell that they don't hit. There's not, like, it's not like that they're bad, because Iron Maiden does have some bad songs, and especially modernly, like, I think they've sort of lost their inspiration. But like, you can just tell what is like inspired and what is really like that they've put passion into and that has this unique flair to it, and what sort of like they're just like, oh yeah, the Flight of Icarus, that's a cool story, let's make a song about that.
And the song, like you said, it's not necessarily bad,
Right.
but it's not the same.
Right.
Yeah, it's not at the same level of the rest of the album, because I would say that, because like you said, there are definitely albums where they have just bad songs on it, and this isn't one of those that it goes to the point that they have bad songs, but they definitely have ones that don't hit in the way the others do.
Yeah, just comparing Flight of Icarus to like Still Life, like you can tell which one of those stories they liked more, is what I'm saying. Like you can tell which one of them they had more of a personal resonance with, because of the way that they've put effort into it and like the subtle details and stuff like that. Yeah, fun fact about To Tame a Land. The song was originally going to be called Dune, but Frank Hebert, writer of said novel,
Book.
famously fucking hates heavy metal, and he said, no, you're not allowed to put my book as the name of your song. So, that's a fun fact.
I will say, given the way they wrote the lyrics and like the kind of fixation on political power and conquest, I can understand Frank Herbert feeling like they kind of missed the fucking point of Dune, which is that Paul's not a hero. His being a hero is not a good thing. The hero narrative in general is lethal and destructive, and like but that's, to be fair, a lot of people miss that point in Dune because Paul is such a compelling protagonist.
Right.
But I can sort of get why Frank Herbert would like dislike a lot of 80s metal, because there was like much more of that like kind of just uncritical wielding of those themes, right? Of like violence and like destiny, and Dune was very much intended to be a critique of those organizing stories, you know?
Yeah. I agree, but I don't know if it was that deep. I think he might have just been a crotchety old man at that point. I don't know.
Yeah, and didn't want his works being appropriated.
Right.
Either is plausible, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, who knows? He's dead, so
We can't ask.
you can't ask him at this point. He's been dead for a long time.
Who's got the Ouija board?
Right. So- that's such a nerdy fucking thing to do. Use a Ouija board to
Ouija
summon
board.
your favorite sci-fi
Frank
novelist.
Herbert. Frank Herbert says, "Fuck off, let me sleep." please."
Right. 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 Speaking of media perception, Still Life at the beginning has a little thing that's backwards audio, right? And because, okay, so this is Iron Maiden making fun of the whole satanic panic bullshit, and
With playing the records backwards.
with playing the records backwards and summoning the devil. And so it says, let's see, I have the page right here. What ho the ting with the three bonts, don't meddle with things you don't understand. So essentially it's nothing, it doesn't mean anything. They're
Right.
just fucking with you. And so, like, if you did that now, obviously it'd be so played out. But in 1983, that's a good joke, in my opinion.
Oh, I agree.
Especially coming directly after their album Number of the Beast that features the devil
666, yeah.
prominently. I
And
wore mine.
think in many ways, the internet has ruined jokes like that.
Right.
Not because they're any less clever, but because the real essence of what makes that joke awesome is that a bunch of, like, conservative parents groups would all individually have to realize that, like, oh my god, there's backmasking, and they'd all have to sit there and play it backwards and be like, oh, they're calling us stupid.
Yeah.
Whereas now, they're like, day one, somebody reverses it and there's an article and they can just be like, Iron Maiden called you stupid, and nobody has to live through the experience of being made to feel
Right.
like an
It's
idiot,
not as fun.
which is the whole point.
Right.
It loses its potency.
Right. It's also significantly easier to do that now instead of having to get the record player and, you know, you could literally just flip the fucking the waveform.
Yeah. Yeah. The ritual of making an ass of yourself was again part of what made it so effective.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, good old, you know, lighthearted Brits, I think that that's one of the reasons why I enjoy Iron Maiden. Is because, like in general, like they, you know, you could tell they take things very, very seriously, but there's an air of, we're just doing this because it's cool, we're just doing this to have fun, we're just doing this because we think it's neat, as opposed to, like, oh, this is so deep and so, oh, you know, life-changing and whatever. Let's just make a album about the fucking devil. Like, fuck it, right?
Yeah.
Like, fuck it.
And I mean, for the most part, you know, they came around after Black Sabbath.
Right.
Black Sabbath was still going.
Right.
They came around after AC/DC, which on a different level, different type of hard rock, but still had, you know, they were still given that sort of demonic persona by people because of just the way they performed, their name, even though the whole AC/DC thing was the power switch on one of the sisters' sewing machines. It had nothing
Right.
to do with Antichrist and all of that, but they came after those first couple bands that were really getting the rep.
Direct current. What?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That's what it stands for.
Basic
Yeah.
fucking.
You're literally just, yeah. Let's see. I have to check this because they
Never
came
been
after
told
Black
so.
Sabbath, but only by a few years.
Yeah, not by much.
Oh, by a decade. By a decade.
Oh,
'Cause-
I thought it was just like 5 or 6, but
No, because Black Sabbath's first album was 1970. Iron Maiden's first album was 1980.
mm.
So, and we have to listen to Black Sabbath self-titled some point.
Oh, absolutely.
In Music Club. I even have the vinyl for that one. That's a classic. Fucking metal.
Oh, yeah. Well, and, besides the storytelling, one of the other things that I thought of is you can hear the different influences from the genres they've adapted. Like, you can hear some of the Black Sabbath influence in their music. Some of the songs have almost have kind of a Ronnie James Dio feel to it. You can hear some of the prog rock influence. Like, you can hear a lot of that depending on which song you listen to.
Hold on. When did Dio's first solo album? Rainbow. Okay. Oh, it was the mid-70s. Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, because it wasn't too much before, but it was definitely before Iron Maiden.
Right, because, yeah, I mean, if you want to say similarity, because Iron Maiden's one of those bands where it's like, yeah, it's heavy metal, you could say some of it's like power metal maybe, but there's not like a lot of other bands that are like really in the same genre, but
No.
Dio
They
Sabbath,
take it to a different place.
Dio Sabbath and just Dio, are the same genre as early Iron Maiden. Like, those are some of the few bands that are actually in the same sort of realm, where most other bands sort of go another way with it, especially modernly, I think. I think power metal, stuff like Dragon Force and stuff, is the evolution of Iron Maiden, but it's not the same genre.
I agree.
Yeah, it's frankly, yeah. I think a lot of contemporary power metal it became like Iron Maiden, like sans the self-awareness and levity.
Yeah.
A lot of them started taking themselves really seriously, and that, in many ways, kind of made the music worse. Because I agree that there's like to me, I think unavoidably of Ian Anderson, right? In that when you can write music like this and kind of have your tongue in your cheek the whole time, right? You're never taking yourself too seriously, even though you are willing to paint with these pretty big emotions. But you're crucially still having fun with it.
And I think that was a big thing of British power metal, right? It's the tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
Right. That the Americans just don't have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, again, that's fun. I think there is a space for a certain degree of like seriousness in music as well, but again, just different intents. And I think the fact, like, if they had again, like, we've seen that when you do this genre with a sense of total self-seriousness, it doesn't work.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. It sort of becomes the like cringe, right? It sort of becomes the like, because you can be serious about the music. I don't think that Iron Maiden doesn't really write like joke songs. Like, they'll put jokes into songs. It's not Jethro Tull though, right? They're not writing an entire song as a joke, but yeah, it's sort of like, oh, here's a story, right? This isn't the deep, this is my life, like, this is my soul. It's just sort of like, oh, here's a fun story. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think they are again more in the Jethro Tull tradition, pulling back from minstrels and bards and saying that the number one objective of an artist in this vein is to entertain.
Yeah.
And to ensure that everyone has a good time, and it's less about there's no like, this is my magnum opus in which my soul has been compressed into a single multifaceted musical jewel, right? Where like the stakes are so high that you can't help but be like, oh god, this is what the interior of your head sounds like all the time. Ooh, I'm sorry, dude.
Yeah.
All of your emotions are that, like, yeah. But again, I think here it works really, really well. It's just
Right. And not to say that that level of seriousness and self-seriousness in music is a bad thing, but in power metal, it does come off a little weird because it's, especially when it's meant to sound big and grandiose, and you're like, this
Larger
is
than
what
life,
my
yeah.
inner voice sounds like, and it's just like some dude screaming about dragons and fucking like wicked fast riffs, just right? Like, imagine Through the Fire and the Flames. Everyone's heard that fucking song, right? Imagine if someone's like, this is what my inner voice sounds like all the time. That's kind of like, whoa, dude.
hello, delusions of grandeur. Like,
Right, right.
That is the essence of it. It's
Right.
that metal. This kind of metal is dealing with the grandiose, and to try and make that like your confessional style is to be basically like, I think of myself as Conan the Barbarian.
Right.
It's
Right.
like, ugh.
Right. Right. I'm sure that Iron Maiden's done a song about Conan the Barbarian. I don't know what album. I don't know
But
where.
you feel like it has to be told somewhere.
But I feel like they have. That just fits.
Gotta go for deep cuts and go Solomon Kane.
Maybe, I don't know. That
Other
just fits
property.
so well. It's like fantasy and it's like old, like, I don't know. Maybe that's too racist for them. I don't know. I don't know. Because they're not that. They actually have. I remember they have a song that's like about like a Klansman or something, and like, but it's painted in a very negative light. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think it mentioned in a brief dive, I forget which member, but like one of them was in a pretty overtly anti-fascist gang prior to. Like, oh yeah, he was part of a gang of metalheads beating up skinheads. So like, police, you're seeing. We failed. There's so many Nazis in metal now.
Yeah. I mean, like, oh fuck, dude. Like,
There are so many.
there really are. There really are. But we're trying to get rid of them.
Well, gentlemen, I'm coming to where I have to wrap up, so let me give you my numbers here.
Yeah. Do the ratings. We'll probably jump in with that afterwards. So you can go first.
So, I'll start with musicianship. You know, I think, like we talked about, this is a very balanced band.
Mm-hmm.
They're all good. There's not like where you're like, wow, that's the greatest person ever in any instrument. You're like, damn, these guys are good at what they play, and that's pretty universal. So I would say for musicianship, I would give them a 9 across the album,
Mm-hmm.
because I think it's generally solid.
Mm-hmm.
Cohesiveness, I would give the album an 8. Like I said, I think it all flows together, but they are disparate stories.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like that they're meant to carry on between each song, but it's still a very cohesive album. The style of music is very cohesive. Everything flows very nicely. Weird factor, again, you know, going back to 1983, you didn't have a lot of bands that were doing this kind of music. You still don't, really. There's the evolution of power metal in particular. We've got British power metal, which I think has a little more of the tongue-in-cheek aspect to it. So I would give it, putting it in context, I think I would give it a 6, because I think we mentioned kind of the influences, the same genre of Black Sabbath, Ronnie James Dio. That's the genre that we're in. As far as, let's see, cohesive, weird, musicianship, I don't think that leaves with overall. And
Weird, cohesion,
missing one?
musicianship. There's four.
I thought there were 4. Why can't I remember what the fourth one is?
Listenability.
There we go. Listenability. For me, this is a very listenable album. I like this kind of metal, so I would give this an 8.5 for listenability. I think it's very listenable. It's something I can sit and. It's not something you want to do while you're like sitting and crocheting or baking a pie, because it's very upbeat, but
Yeah.
it's very listenable. You know?
Challenge accepted. Kayla's been crocheting. I'm gonna put this on.
and,
Oh.
Why are you?
and then
why are
report
you
back
knitting-
next week.
Why are you knitting pentagrams?
Yeah. Right.
And overall, I think it's a good album. I think I would put it up. I think I'd give it a 9. I think it's a real solid album. I think there are parts that don't hit as well, like Ethan had said, and songs that aren't as good as others. But in general, it's a very good album. It's not one where I'd have to like skip a song or anything like that. Like there's not a song where I'm like, wow, this one is terrible.
Yeah.
I'm just not gonna listen to it. So yeah, I think that rounds it out. Overall, solid album, excellent pick, good discussion.
Yeah. Absolutely. Peace
But
out, Brian.
I'd love to hear the ratings. I'll catch up with that from you guys later, and I'm
For
gonna
sure.
hop off for now. Have a good one, gentlemen.
See ya. All right. I mean, we can keep going with ratings, or if you have any discussion things in your brain.
I think I hit most of my points. If you want to go into ratings, we can. Should I go or should you?
You could go.
Okay.
You won't sway me. I've listened to this album so many times. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Listenability wise, I think I can say for me personally, it's close to like. A 6.5, mostly because it's distracting, which isn't bad, right? It's like it's not background music.
Absolutely.
There is a
Yeah.
lot of noise happening. That is, I mean, it's the sort like. To be fair, I was the first time I was kind of listening through it. I was kind of tired, and I was trying to, admittedly, read an article on electrostatic phenomena on planetary surfaces, and I will tell you, this fucked with my reading comprehension. It's totally not that I just have trouble with dense astronomical text. It's totally Iron Maiden's fault, not my brain's. But in all due seriousness, there's music that you can put on and still be able to focus while on something else while listening to. This is not that music for me,
Yeah.
at least.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean it's objectionable. It's just yeah, it's distracting, and it is the sort of thing where even as much as I love Jethro Tull, I very rarely can like feel like putting on a full album of theirs. I'll listen to a couple of songs to get the vibe, and then I'm like, okay, that's my dose of Jethro Tull for now. Precisely because of the like theatricality and the sheer grandiosity of it.
Right.
Although, as Brian has repeatedly said, all of this stuff is excellent workout music. Doing physical stuff, perfect soundtrack for that. Musicianship, yeah, it's hard to rate. I mean, they're definitely super tight. They're definitely very competent players. And I realize, as much as it's difficult for my 2021 brain to fairly judge how wide somebody ranges in terms of like the kind of melodic and harmonic choices they will make given the opportunity to solo, because the palette of easily accessible music was just much smaller then. We weren't, you know, at best we were getting these kind of watered down world music records. But, you know, we're not... So what they're doing really well, but there's not like... But they're in their niche and they're comfortable with it, right? So I could give them points for having really mastered that, but in terms of having like the kind of musical curiosity that gets you that gets you somebody who tackles things like one of the many music YouTubers out there, right? Who are just like insatiably musically curious and picking up like non-quantizable rhythms and microtonal. There's not a ton of that, which is not a requirement for good musicianship. So again, I'll give them I'll give them an 8 because they're really solid. They're just not like they're really well developed in their niche, and they're not really interested in pushing the envelope farther than that, which they're not obligated to. Because particularly at this point, that niche was only really filled by them and 2 other acts. Weird factor. I think in a post Black Sabbath, Jethro Tull and Dio world, when did Iron Maiden start releasing music?
1980.
Okay. They're doing their own thing with it. They sound like them, but I think this general approach to music, that trail had been blazed in a variety of ways. And again, they're kind of taking those paths and finding their own space in that territory. So I'll give them. I would give it like a 6 or a 6.5. It's not super weird, but I think it does take a lot of bravery and, frankly, a lot of just a reasonably. Again, like the fact that they can be tongue in cheek and have fun with it, having that level of confidence is nice, and frankly gives them weird points, because to me it means that they are communicating more in their own authentic voice, such as it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which puts us last would be cohesion, right?
Yep.
Again, I think here probably like a 7's appropriate, because it definitely all maintains their sound, but it is definitely more like it feels more like somebody handed me, just one of the like sci-fi story periodicals, right? It's like a collection of short stories, right? And they all jive well together, but they're not constructed with like they're not all unified towards a single aim, which again things don't have to be, and they do all fit well together. If we view it as a multi-course meal, no one song sours the others by virtue of it. It's there. So yeah, like a 7, because it all fits together well, but it's not like a 900-page tightly constructed novel, all getting you to a single payoff moment.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that was all 4?
Yep.
Okay, so musicianship. One thing that I want to comment on is I don't think that necessarily every member of Iron Maiden is like, the best musician in the world. However, I do want to say that Bruce Dickinson is one of the best vocalists, period, like in terms of popular music. I'm sure there's plenty of classically trained vocalists who can do crazy things, but in terms of popular music, his voice, he has a 4-octave range, and he can go up to a C2, I believe. Yeah, he's within or C2 to C6. Yeah, C2 is low. C6, naturally. That's without any force. Like, I only wish that I had the technical ability of Bruce Dickinson. So I will say, but that doesn't necessarily come off as much on this album. Number of the Beast, I think, has more impressive stuff. The reason I was reaching for this is because I don't know if... Wait, really? Oh, it's not plugged in. Never mind. Because I was like, I could go on there and play the note, but... Because I have it hooked up to my laptop now. I have...
Oh, wait, I could, you want me to... It was a C2 and a C6, you said?
Yeah, C2 to C6.
Oh, my Keylab is on, so I'll just load up I handle my vocal processing through Ableton, so...
All right.
And it's the audio streaming's on the master bus, so it's an opportunity for me to show off my needlessly complicated vocal effects suite.
Yeah.
That's probably not a 2. I just realized the problem with this being a 61 key is I can draw some blank MIDI and just know.
What is it? Where is the...
That is ostensibly a C2, and this is a C6.
So that's insane. Like, I can't even try to falsetto. Like, he can go insanely high, full voice, just up there. Like,
Yeah.
so like I have to give that points. Like, I have to give Bruce points. And also Steve Harris, the bass work on this album is so good. It's so tight, and he has a very unique style of, because he plays with 3 fingers where most bass players play with 2. He plays with 3, so it's do 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 do. So I'm gonna give the musicianship. I think Brian gave it a 9. I think I'm gonna have to also give it a 9. They're just so tight and so good. Just so good at their instruments. They are what people should... That's the level I think people should, like, aspire to. Obviously, it's not like... there is still room, for virtuosity above that. But, like... Absolutely fantastic. In terms of listenability, I kind of have to agree with you that it's not background music. I have a lot of memories of being on the bus, riding home with Iron Maiden in my ears and kind of zoning out and just kind of imagining the things that are happening in the music. And in that scenario, it's perfect, right? It's stimulating, it's got stuff to think about. But yeah, no, maybe crocheting might be fine, because you're not necessarily using the language centers of your brain. But reading, oh hell no. So yeah, I think maybe 7. Because it really depends on the scenario. Let's see. Cohesion, probably also a 7. It definitely sounds like Iron Maiden, the whole album, and it definitely sounds like the same Iron Maiden album. They do tend to have like a little bit of sound difference between album to album. But it's not like the album was written to be a piece. It's not a piece. Yeah. It's songs that are together, and they might sound similar, but they are just song. There's not even like 2 songs that play into each other. Like, there are transitions between some of the songs, and there are like timbral similarities between 2 songs, but they're not like meant to... Like, you don't listen to Where Eagles Dare, go into Revelations, and get some kind of unique experience from listening to those 2 songs back to back, as opposed to you would having them in any different order. The order is good for the flow of the album, sort of like, fast song, slow song, whatever, but it's not some special, like, if you did listen to them out of order, you'd be fine. Let's see, musicianship, creation. Did I forget one? Listenability. Weird factor. So Iron Maiden's definitely one of those bands that is kind of like, oh, look how weird we are. Alright, we have a zombie as our mascot. Which I will say, I normally am annoyed by band mascots, but Iron Maiden sort of was one of the first bands to actually have like a mascot, like an actual mascot. So Eddie does not annoy me in the way that a modern band having some kind of like zombie figure that they'd have to put on every single album cover would annoy me now. Um, but you are right in that, you know, Black Sabbath was singing about the devil 10 years before this. Um, you know, Dio was fucking killing mythological creatures on album covers, you know, before this. Um,
Jesus Christ.
so,
God is dead, and Dio personally killed him.
well, also Dio's dead, so
Yeah.
maybe that is God.
Around.
Yeah. Um, so, like, it is definitely a lot weirder than what we would think of it as today, right? If this came out today, I'd give it 5, right? It's pretty normal. It's not the most normal thing, but it's pretty normal. Back then, 7.5. They definitely did things intentionally to be weird, to be different, to be unique, to freak people out or do whatever to fuck with people. So, like, there definitely have points there. But yeah, it's not the most weird thing. Overall. It's tough. That's tough. I might have to think about it for a second. If you have an overall rating in your mind.
Yeah. I think. Yeah, it's one of those things where I have to say that my personal taste, and I think its value as an evolution of various human artistic traditions differ a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is the sort of thing that I can handle in small doses, but it's not the sort of thing that I like really, really, really vibe with.
Mm-hmm.
But I can say that looking at it more as like something with clear cultural impact and like a lot of, that kind of spread the seeds for a lot of neat things to come, I can give it like an 8.5. But as for how much it resonates with me personally, it's more like a 7.5. 7.5 or even a 7, just because it's one of those things where I can totally agree that this is clearly a very capable vocalist. I just don't dig the sound that much.
Yeah.
It's too theatrical for me. I guess. I would be the, and that is, perhaps a testament purely to the long period of my life in which I had to have Stanislavski method acting principles drilled into my head after doing a lot of Shakespeare as a kid, and starting from that like big amplified place and slowly having to be reconditioned more towards more humanistic, kind of grounded portrayal.
Right.
And even when you are working with intensity, working with a kind of intensity that still feels authentic and not magnified, which, cool, epic, totally valuable. I mean, there's a reason so many myths stand the test of time. That storytelling style is wonderful. I just personally have had my taste steered in other directions.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm gonna have to go with 8.7. I don't normally break it down that much. I don't quite want to give the album a 9 because it's not even my favorite Iron Maiden album. But I think it's really good. I love this band. I love a lot of the songs on here. And I think it's almost to that 9 level. there are very few albums that I would give a 10. So, it is within striking range. You know, it's not perfect. Definitely not. There are flaws in there, and I think one of the reasons why I can't even give it a 9 is because there are songs on this album that I don't like. Like, there are, like, maybe I could give an individual song a higher rating, but when there are songs in the album that I'm like, I would normally skip this song if I wasn't listening to the full album, I can't really give the album a super high rating. Well, 8.7 is high, but I can't give it a 9. So yeah, that's my rating. I will say, I'm gonna post the link, but if you're watching this, go listen to Iron Maiden's Rime of the Ancient Mariner. It's 13 minutes long, and it is actually a really good telling of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. So yeah. Iron Maiden, love it. I mean, I have this fucking Iron Maiden t-shirt that I've had since I was in high school. Yeah.
Good pick.
Yeah.
Listen.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're still watching, or if you're watching back or whatever, recording on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitch. Links are in the description to socials, whatever. Tell me what you think. Tell me that I'm a fucking idiot, that this is the best album that's ever made, or that Iron Maiden is trash. Tell me what I should listen to. Yeah,
All
just...
bands should have mascots.
Oh, God.
Compulsory mascots.
Yeah, they should, and they should be like stupid, shitty football mascots or whatever. Where you just like pick an animal.
No, all bands have mascots. It's the fucking construct that is their goddamn Instagram profile.
Yeah.
Just have more Uncanny Valley mascots now. Not even Uncanny Valley, things that pass for real, hyper real mascots.
Yeah.
We won't get into that.
Well, and we've even devolved to the point where
Such an old man, Jesus Christ.
I think a lot of artists become their own mascot, where their artistic persona is a version of themselves, if you will, that isn't real at all.
Grimes.
Yeah, Grimes. Grimes big time. She's nothing like that. But also her modern music isn't any good, so fuck her. But also fuck Elon Musk. Elon Musk is one of the people that I hate the most in the world. Like,
Or rather,
in the
don't
world.
fuck Elon.
Yeah, stop fucking Elon Musk. Stop. I mean, it's too late. You already had a fucking stupid baby. I mean, the baby's probably fine, but the name of the baby is stupid. I don't know. We should listen to Grimes so I can go on a whole fucking rant about performative creativity and
We
how
should definitely wait.
and how being lol randoms does not make you creative or unique. Just because you're weird and different? Ugh. Ugh.
We should definitely have Kayla here for that.
Okay.
Because Kayla, I mean, mostly likes her for her like very early Witch House stuff, which I
Right.
think was a little more grounded, shall we say?
Yeah, her first couple albums were good.
And I will say, having seen interviews with her, I do believe that she's like. We don't need to go on a whole digression, but I
Right.
believe that she's genuinely a quirky and voracious reader. But I think she falls, funnily enough, into kind of the metal trap, where
Yeah.
it's like you'll read stuff and not really comprehend it, but then appropriate a lot of the imagery.
Right. And also taking herself way too seriously.
Yeah, well, we're supposed to do that now. How else are we going to make money?
That's true. That's true. That's true. Yeah.
We have lived through the death of nuance.
Yeah. I'll have to there was I don't know if it's currently her Spotify bio, but her old Spotify bio is one of the worst things I've ever read in my life. Um it was just literally like quirky little random bullshit like Grimes was born
yeah.
to parents who were 90 years old and then abandoned and raised by wolves, and then she farted unicorn. Like, it's that kind of dumb bullshit. And
I'm just.
I know she
you're
was
welcome,
giggling to
Ethan.
herself the entire time while writing it, and that's what makes me angry.
Ethan, I'm so glad that I could get us our outrage marketing angle. We'll just make part of your like violent hatred of Grimes. We'll just attract a bunch of hate from their fans and get
Right.
get all that engagement juice.
That's true. If you want to do, I have other artists that I hate too. I can make a list. We can make a list of just hate videos that we can make. A good one would be Azalea
algorithm will love
Banks, because she tends to get in beefs with people online. Also, she's extremely racist. But if if somehow it gets back to her that we're talking shit, then that's publicity. So
Yes.
yes,
Feed Jack Dorsey.
yes. No, she's banned from Twitter permanently.
No, that's fair.
Yeah.
Probably.
For saying racist shit, yeah, and homophobic shit, yeah. Which is ironic because everyone that listens to Azalea Banks, her target demographic is gay men. Anyway, I already did the spiel. Follow me, bitches. Or don't. I don't care.
He would appreciate it.
I would love. You can DM me. I may not respond, but you can DM me. No, I do. I actually like to engage with people on social media and try to actually have real conversations. So, and this is the early stage. See, we don't have many views now. So if you want to talk to this, don't wait too long. Is what I'm saying. Because once this shit takes off and there's thousands of views, you're just gonna be, you're gonna. It's just needle in a haystack, right? So. Anyway, I'm shutting off the recording.